Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Know Before You Go, Sailing Antarctica, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Colby Brokvist. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. Over to you, Colby.
Thanks, Rob. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here with you today. I'm really excited to talk to you about Antarctica. This is a Know Before You Go webinar. So this is specifically designed for people that are booked on our trips currently that want to know a little bit more information, insider information, if you will, from the expedition leaders. In this case, it's me. I'm representing 3 expedition leaders that lead these trips down there. So you may end up down there with me or Dan or Marlo this year. We're all there. These are wonderful trips. Of course, in my introductory slide, it's always tricky on these. What am I going to show? Or is it going to show all the activities? Is it going to show the different yachts we use? Is it going to show the penguins? There's so much baked into these trips that it's just such a wonderful experience. And even though today we're going to focus a little bit more on some of the logistics and nuts and bolts about being ready for the trip and what to expect when you're down there, let's not forget that this is all, just the means to the end for all the really juicy stuff once we get down there. So a few things that I'm going to talk about today. First, I just want to give you a little trip overview, talk about some of our goals and objectives for the trip that we all share together, and then talk a little bit about expectations for different aspects of the trip. Some logistical details and advice, just what to pack, what kind of boots do I need, how many pairs of gloves. I'll give you advice on that kind of stuff. And then we'll have a little Q&A like Rob said right at the end. So that's what we'll be covering today. So a bit of a trip overview. Of course, we're going down to Antarctica, which is a huge continent, right? It's like saying like, oh, I'm going to go to Europe. Like, all right, well, where in Europe are you going? Like all the different places in Europe are different. Antarctica as a continent is no different than the other continents, that there are different qualities to different parts of this continent. And so where we're going to be going specifically is the Antarctic Peninsula. And on this map, you'll see that in the top left, you'll see that little snaky bit of land that comes out, and it sticks out into the Drake Passage. It has a bit of a maritime effect going on there. And so the peninsula is specifically targeted by us and really by most tourism in Antarctica, because this is the wildlife rich area of the continent. It's said that only about 4% of Antarctica is exposed land. The rest of it is all ice. And of that 4%, a good chunk of that, the vast majority of that, in fact, is on the peninsula. And so this ends up being a really nice place for birds to come nest and for certain types of seals to haul out. And then in addition, because the peninsula does stick way out into the ocean, there's some particular qualities to the ocean currents and the ocean floor that causes some deep water upwelling that brings nutrients from the tropical regions of the world down into the Southern Ocean and then injects it all into the surface waters of the Antarctic Peninsula. And so the peninsula has great breeding areas, it has great resting areas, and it has an abundance of food, and that brings all of the wildlife down. So that's why we're going specifically to the peninsula on this trip. And of course, the wildlife is one of the main events. I'm not going to show you a lot of pictures right now of the wildlife, and you know what you're getting into and you know what you're there for, but I can say you're going to see a lot of penguins. You're going to see different types of penguins, particularly the brush-tail penguins. So the Gen 2s that are pictured here, we have chin straps, we have the Delhi penguins. Occasionally, we might get some stray emperor penguins or stray macaroni penguins, but we don't see those very often. It might even be every second or third year on one of my trips that I see one of those penguins. But the brush tails, those 3 brush tail penguins, we see those quite a bit, and we'll be making time to try to find all of those penguins for you when we're there. And then seals, of course, the vicious, ferocious leopard seals, crab eaters, weddles, all of that, elephant seals, fur seals, all of those are there. And whales. Whales are a prominent feature of this. And we have orca, humpback whales, minke whale. Those are the 3 common whales that we see down there. And for those trips that are crossing the Drake Passage, we could see almost any whale that you could name out there, particularly along the continental shelves of South America and Antarctica during our approaches to those continents. So lots and lots and lots of wildlife when we're out there. And not only that, but we have the ability to experience all this wildlife and the space, the wilderness that is Antarctica by a variety of means. So we have kayaks aboard each of our 3 vessels. We do have 3 different vessels. So today I should mention you might be on the Hanse Explorer, the Australis, or the Ocean Tramp, and they're all just wonderful, like very charismatic, small vessels that allow us to do a lot of different things and in different ways than what some of those bigger cruise ships do. So it's a really, really special trip, no matter which boat you're on. But we get to get into the ice with all of these boats. You'll see wildlife that's there, and really just the scenic cruising from these yachts is absolutely incredible. That's an activity on its own, especially when the sails go up on the 2 sailboats, right? 2 of the boats, the Australis and the Ocean Tramp, also have capabilities for camping. So that's part of it. Of course, the Hanse Explorer is a very well-appointed ship on the inside with some interior staff. And so we imagine if you're choosing that trip, you're probably not wanting to go camping, so that we don't have camping aboard the Hanse Explorer. But otherwise, that's a regular part of the other 2 trips. And then Zodiacing, right? We have these rubber inflatable boats, and we're out in the Zodiacs all the time. Sometimes they land us ashore so we can go walk around in the penguin colonies, or we can do a little hike up to an overlook. Other times, the Zodiac cruising is its own activity. We're going to get out there in the icebergs, and we're going to bang into the sea ice a little bit. If you're there with us early season, we're going to look for seals, we're looking for penguins in the water, this sort of thing, and we use the Zodiacs for that. So all sorts of ways to experience all of the wildlife and the scenery down there. Now, you'll notice on the slide here, it says strategy, a deep dive. We're going to do this. We're going to do a deep dive into Antarctica. You know, we can think in terms of these trips, like to compare them a little bit to what you might get on one of the cruise ships. And those are wonderful, wonderful trips on their own. And they're moving from place to place, and they're seeing a selection of what there is to do in each different area. And they cover some big distances on the peninsula. Our trips, we cover much smaller distances, and we do that for a reason. We've chosen to offer these trips specifically for that reason, is because we have a much more intimate experience down in there. And being only 7 passengers instead of, you know, upwards of 200 passengers on some of these cruise ships, it means that we can go to a lot of places that these cruise ships will never even think about going. So instead of, you know, a beach landing that can handle 100 people at a time, we can go to a beach landing that might just hold 10 of us. And those are wonderful, wonderful, very intimate places. And that's one of the things that I think really makes this itinerary, these 3 trips, stand out from some of the, what I would call kind of normal cookie cutter Antarctic experiences. So you can expect that we're going to be going to a lot of places that maybe you haven't heard of, or if you have friends that say, oh, I was down in Antarctica and you should go to this place, we might not go there, because that's a place that's built for 100 people to be at. And there are more interesting places that we can access because we're just a really small group. And I think that's a really, really special thing about our trip. I also use the term strategy a lot rather than having a plan down there. So you probably noticed when you signed up for your trip that it's something to the effect of day 1 you arrive, day 2 we're around Punta Arenas, day 3 through 16 it's Antarctica, day 17 you're departing, right? And it's because there is no real plan. We don't have an itinerary. We don't have a route that we're going to be following. Even day to day, if you were to ask us, what are we doing tomorrow? We're going to talk about intentions. Say, well, we're intending on going over here if the weather holds, or if the conditions for a sea crossing aren't too bad. Otherwise, we're going to do something else that's better or more appropriate to the conditions that Antarctica is throwing at you. And the weather changes all the time. Really, like in real time, it changes. And so we're always adapting our strategies to that. We're also adapting our strategies according to the things that we hear from other ships around. We're in constant communication via radio with some of the other vessels that are around there. And I know a lot of people that are on some of those other ships as expedition leaders, the captain of each of our boats, they know other people, and even some of the crew. And so we're getting all this real-time insider information about, hey, you guys, there's a big concentration of humpback whales over here, or this is the last place we saw, you know, the orcas. And if we're in those areas, we might choose to say, hey, we were going to go kayaking this morning, but we just found out there's a bunch of orca over there and they're all hunting penguins, and hang on to your hats, we're going over there right now. And so that's why this trip is so magical, and it's also why you don't see a very specific listing of the sites that we're going to go see on that itinerary. So be prepared for a true adventure. We have a lot of tricks up our sleeve between me and the captain, the other ELs. We know a lot about what's going on in that area and what our options are, and it's no problem for us to be building something as we go in real time. And of course, we're doing this in mind with all of your objectives, right? We know you want to see big penguin colonies. We know you want to see the 3 brush tails. We know you want to go kayaking and camping. We know that these are the things that make up an exceptional Antarctic experience. But I can't tell you if we're going to go kayaking on day 2 or if we're going to go kayaking on day 15, right? But we'll go kayaking when we're out there, and we're going to have a good time doing it. By virtue of such a small group with 7 to 12 people on each one of these trips that we're discussing here today, we also have the ability to personalize these trips a great deal. I've had people, for instance, that really enjoy camping or really enjoy kayaking, and we prioritize being able to find places to do that over some of the other things. And that's another really wonderful thing I think about this, that you don't get on those big ships where they have to stick to a particular schedule, so they're not all in the same place trying to land 100 people at a time. We can slip in, we can slip out, we can do whatever we want, and we can remain very, very flexible as we go along. So I think it's good for you to know that we have a lot of things that are on our tick list. We share those goals with you, and then we're going to do our best to make sure every one of those things happens, and it always does over the course of the trip. And it might be more or less of something, just depending on interests and weather. Okay, so what we ask of you in this is that you embrace this idea of expedition mentality, right? So we're not going to have a plan. You need to be comfortable with that and just know that whatever is happening right now is the best thing that can be happening to us down there. Antarctica is all about being present in this great wilderness. Yeah, we don't have regular schedules. We don't have logistics, people to help us out with things. We have all kinds of changing variables all the time, new information coming in. And so being flexible is really, really important when you come down there. So have that idea in your mind that you're on a true expedition. We are exploring, we are adventuring when we're down there. We don't know what's going to happen. And we're going to embrace whatever it is that Antarctica gives to us. And we're going to make that the best thing that we can. Also on these ships, all 3 of these vessels, they're very, very small, and you're going to be with a very intimate group. And so it'll be important to come in, in a group mindset that we're going to help each other out a little bit. Sometimes, there's tight quarters when, there's wildlife outside, and we all want to throw on all our waterproofs and get outside and be able to see the wildlife. So let's make some room for each other to all do that. Pass the jackets around, help each other with our life jackets. We'll all get out there together. So pitching in, watching out for each other, helping each other, being courteous, being polite, keeping your stuff like in your own rooms and not have it spread all over the common areas. All these kind of things make ship life much more comfortable and really a lot easier for everybody when we're down there. And then if you can take care of yourself and manage yourself and your things, then everybody else can do the same. And then we're all ready to go and be ready to go participate in these activities, even at a moment's notice. If we're cruising around and orca comes up, we can all just be ready to go because things are organized and tight on the ship, and everybody's getting along and participating. Expedition mentality. So let's talk a little bit about weather and conditions down there. You're going to Antarctica. We're going there in the summertime, and I think that's really important to recognize that you're going to go during the warmest part of the year, and that can be pretty warm. Generally speaking, I would say you can expect the temperatures to be somewhere plus or minus freezing. Yeah, some days it's a little colder, some days it's a little warmer. And in the days that we have down there that's sunny and warm, it might even be up into the low 50s or something like that Fahrenheit. But it can also be down into the teens Fahrenheit if a storm comes and we have winds that are coming down off of the Antarctic ice sheets. So you want to be ready for a variety of conditions down there. You're also going to be in the marine environment, and you're going to be on small boats. including the Zodiacs, but also the main vessels, the motherships themselves. And so there can be splashing. You want to be outside sometimes when the wind is, just ripping through as these boats are moving. Some days it's not that cold out, but by virtue of the ship is moving, like we're creating a wind that's a very cold wind, right? And then also some days, it's just kind of like manky and foggy and a little wet out, even if it's not pouring rain, it's just kind of wet and foggy, especially around the Shetlands. We see that a lot. And you still want to be able to be outside, yeah, because Antarctica, it's outside, yeah. And we spend a lot of time out there. So having layers to be able to go on and off is the best solution for you for these conditions, yeah. If you have something light and something heavy, it doesn't give you a lot of options. Or if you have something light and a lot of medium things that you can just layer on top of each other, then no matter what the temperatures are or the conditions are, you can always take one more thing on and one more thing off. So that'll help. And I'll talk a little bit more about packing clothing in a couple of minutes. But the idea is that the weather is very variable and it's changing a lot, and it's changing minute by minute. Sometimes. So we might start an activity and we'll leave the ships and go ashore, and it'll be like something. And 2 hours later, when we're getting ready to leave, it's like a completely different day out there. So we want to be ready for anything when we're out there. So that's what's happening with weather and conditions. I'll talk a little bit about gear packing here in just a couple of minutes. Speaking of conditions, I also want to talk about the Drake, right? Woo, the infamous Drake passage. Some of you are going to fly right over the Drake and never see it. Others are going to go right through the Drake. And then there are other crossings as well. Like some of the areas around if like the Hanse Explorer, for instance, gets into the Weddell Sea, or any of the ships crossing the Bransfield Strait, which we have to do once or twice on every single voyage, we can still get in some pretty big water. So I highly recommend just being in your bunk. That is the place that most people end up being, and bring audiobooks and podcasts. That's how most people get through the big crossings. Yeah. Depending on you might do more, better or worse with seasickness. But even if you're not really getting seasick, the boats move a lot when we're in some of the big water, and it's often easier and potentially even safer, depending on your own physical abilities, to just be in bed. So for most of the Drake, for instance, me, the crew, like unless we're on watch on the bridge, we're just in our beds. So plan on a lot of time being in your bed. If you want to get out and move around and you feel comfortable doing that, of course, you're always welcome to do that. But most people, most of the time, are going to be in the bed. And the point is to be prepared for that by having podcasts and audiobooks ready to go. Some people are able to read, some people are able to watch movies, most people are not able to do those things. So I highly recommend podcasts and audiobooks so you can lay there, chill out, and not have to do anything visually. Yeah, other than that, the crossings, the Drake in particular, it's sort of notorious, but you can get the Drake Lake or you can get the Drake Shake. I've come across the Drake in these boats, and it's no different than going across a pond, with a little bit of a stiff wind. And I've gone across the Drake where we have 30-foot troughs, and you drop down into one and you lose the horizon for a minute and a half before you come back up onto the next wave. So it can be a lot of different things. But the Drake is perfectly safe. It's just really big water. It's really exciting. And honestly, I like it because when you're on your way down south and you're on the Drake, there's this buildup, this lead up to getting to Antarctica. And boy, when those first icebergs start showing up after, 2 days out on the ocean, 2 days of watching whales, and you'll have seabirds. You can look right out your window and see giant albatrosses and shearwaters and all these things, right? It's really fun and exciting. And then eventually the continent just kind of starts to show up and it emerges, and you see all the ice covered land down there, and we just arrive, and you really get a sense of how remote Antarctica is. And to me, it just deepens my appreciation for being able to be down there. And then on the way back, what's nice about sailing on the way back for those that are doing that is, we're not just getting sucked away and thrown back into society. There's this, winding down where we still don't really have contact with the outside world, and we get to process our our feelings and our memories a little bit, and some people even journal, and so there's this lead out. So the Drake offers a great deal of opportunity for us, for the people that are doing that want that type of experience. So I would say embrace it. Don't be scared of it. It's always fine. Nobody's going to get hurt on the Drake, but be prepared to be in bed and listen to some audiobooks. Okay, I'm not going to talk a lot about safety, but I want you to know that we are in a very remote area. We're going to be doing a lot of activities that you may or may not be familiar with, but they all carry a little bit of risk with them. And so I want you to know that safety is on our minds all the time as expedition leaders, and I can speak for the captains and the crews as well. We're always thinking about it. You'll hear a lot from us about safety when we're there. What I do want to really drive home for you today is that we're going to be in some extremely remote areas. You won't have access to a hospital. There's no medical clinic to go to. Like, people think, oh, we can probably just go to one of the research stations and use a hospital. There are no hospitals there. Like, that stuff doesn't exist, right? So if we have a real medical issue, one of two things happen. One is the trip stops and we all sail back to Ushuaia or Punta Arenas. The other thing is that the trip stops and we sail up to Stanley or King George Island, and we arrange a private charter plane for you to go out. Either one of those situations means the trip stops for everybody, and because we have to deal with these things. So we're very conservative when we're down there. And what we need everybody to do is to sort of calibrate your own acceptable level of risk to not just what you're comfortable with, but what we're all comfortable with doing in a group setting, and making sure that our choices are managing risk appropriately for the whole group. And so we're always thinking about being conservative when we're down there, so we're not getting ourselves into a situation where something happens, and we can think of minor circumstances too. I mean, even just twisting a wrist getting in and out of the boats, or twisting your leg or something on the rocks, on the ice, that can really inhibit your ability to participate in the rest of the activities. Maybe it's to participate comfortably, maybe it's to participate at all. So we're there to look after you. I'm there to look after you. We need you all to look after yourselves as well, and really take safety seriously. And then the other side of that is the expedition leaders. We're all trained at a professional level as your medics aboard. And we want to know about your medical history before we go down there, because if there's anything that we need, any tools or knowledge or anything that we know about anyone's particular medical circumstances, we can only manage that if we know about it. And once we set sail, there's no more supplies, no more advice we can get. We're off there on our own. And so we need to know what's going on with you, and know that we have a good risk plan in case of any illnesses or mechanical injuries or complications with anything everyone has going on. So thanks for taking those medical forms seriously, for getting them into us early to the concierge department, and we'll make sure that everybody's really well taken care of down there. Past that, the boats, of course, have a full complement of communication stuff. We have satellite phones and radios to other boats, and we can call around and ask for advice and do these kind of things, but physically we're on our own down there to solve our own problems. Yeah, that's that. For those of you that want to check in with friends and family, you're able to do that on your own personal devices. So if you have a like a texting inReach, for instance, you're welcome to bring that along, and you can send a message to your family letting them know that you're okay. But I do want everybody to know that they're not that reliable down there. There aren't as many satellites in the south, and sometimes we're in these big fjord systems and we're surrounded by ice, and the signal doesn't penetrate into these big fjord systems. And it's possible that we can go sometimes even up to a couple days without being able to text out. Now, of course, if there was an emergency, we'd just pull up the anchor and we'd go out, and very quickly we could find reception. But we're not trying to stay in reception all the time. We're trying to go see penguins and do all kinds of cool stuff. And so we might have the boats parked inside the deeper part of some of these fjord systems for a while, which just means that we don't have casual communication to the outside world. So if you're planning on checking in with friends and family, just let them know. You know, if they don't hear from you on one day, that's okay. We are still fully equipped aboard the boat, and if there was any problem, then we would be solving that, and we have all of your own emergency contacts, and so the people back at home would be the first to know if anything was happening with you specifically on board. Another thing about expectations down there, so there's an organization called IATO, and you'll hear a lot about it, but I wanted to mention it now. You know, of course, being a conservation-minded travel company, we participate in IATO, which is the travel association. Most of the operators down there do. And IATO, it comes under the Antarctic Treaty, and it's an association of operators that have developed responsible visitation guidelines for the protection of Antarctica and notably the wildlife, both in the marine and terrestrial environments. So when we're down there, you'll hear a lot about site visitation guidelines at some of the more popular sites. Wildlife viewing, how we're behaving around penguins, how we behave around whales, approach them, minimum distances for approaching these animals and not bothering them. And then also some biosecurity things. So we have a Virkon boot wash that's antifungal and antibacterial that we wash our boots every time we're in and out of the boats. And that's to protect against things like fungal infections at penguin colonies or viruses and things that go through. I'll mention specifically right now, avian flu is a big concern. There's some talk about actually closing down some sites in Antarctica, and they've chosen not to do that this year. South Georgia has closed some sites for avian flu to try to minimize the spread of it. But last year, avian flu existed in some of the southern reaches of the other continents, and it did not make it to Antarctica. And so we're hoping that we can continue to manage things properly down there. There have been some seals that have showed up so far that have avian flu, but they haven't been able to pass it around to all of the bird colonies. Anyway, the point being right now is that these are some things that we take seriously, because if avian flu got into a colony, say, you know, at the Danger Islands, then we're talking about 3 million penguins that are all going to die. It's that bad. So we really have to make sure that we're keeping this terrible disease out of these areas. And that means that there's some funny things that go along with wildlife watching now in Antarctica, protect against the flu, that you should know about beforehand. So it's actually the only continent that you're not allowed to sit on. You can't sit because you can't really wash your clothing very well, right? So we don't lay down on the ground like maybe as a photographer might anymore. You can't lay down. We're trying to not get our knees on the ground. We're not sitting, but you can stand in your rubber boots, and we have those for you. And then when we get back to the boat, we can hose those down and we can dip those boots inside these special solutions, and we can make sure that we're not transferring any diseases from place to place. So there'll be some funny things like that. And I think especially for those that have maybe mobility challenges, and you may need a seat or a rest every now and then. When we're around these wildlife areas, we can't actually be doing that. So we have some seats in buckets and things like that we'll bring down and like to some of the shore landings. If people need a rest when they're there, you can sit on those things that are plastic, and then we can wash those off. And similarly with tripods and this sort of thing. So just be prepared for some sort of like funny little things that you might not expect related to biosecurity and the avian flu at these sites. Each site is a little bit different, and will help you understand what that site requires in order for us to be visiting there responsibly. Okay, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here. We have a lot of questions about clothing and footwear and things. This is a tricky trip for packing, right? Because you're going to come down into South America and you're going to be in town for a little bit, and we're going to be on the boats, and you need some clothing for boat life. And then we're going to be out there doing various activities on the water and on the land, and you need some clothing for all of that. So it's a little bit tricky. My broader advice is like, yes, you need to bring one of everything. You don't need two of everything. Like when I go down to Antarctica, I bring 2 pairs of pants. I'm down there for 21 days at a time, right? I bring 2 pairs of pants. And things like this. So you really want to like pare things down. Now, you don't want to be the person that's wearing, sweaty, disgusting clothes all the time. So some changes in your undershirts and your underwear and your socks, that stuff is appropriate, of course. We also have the ability on the 2 yachts, to the 2 sailboats. You can do some laundry on your own in the bathrooms. We're set up for that. And then they do have a laundry service on Hanse Explorer for people, so you can do laundry. But yeah, I try to minimize the number of things that I'm doing. Like a soft shell pant, you can go a long, long time without having to, launder a soft shell pant. So that's a really great choice for pants, for instance. Some things specifically that people always ask questions about is footwear. I can tell you that hiking boots are a great way to go. That's the most appropriate boot for either Ushuaia or Punta Arenas. And for some people at some of the landings in Antarctica, they might prefer a hiking boot. But for the most part, once we're down there in Antarctica, you want to wear some sort of waterproof boot. And so we have different things available on different ships. On the Australis, we have overboots, these big overboots that have a special sole on the bottom, and then they zip up over your hiking boots, and then they're waterproof. You can get in and out of the water and walk around in the snow and the penguin guano and all this. And then when you get back to the boat, you just pull them off, and then we take care of hosing them off and all that stuff for you. If you're on the ocean tramp, because we're leaving from Punta Arenas, there's an organization there that we work with that can provide boots for you. And you should take advantage of this. And that's going to be more of a traditional rubber muck boot, like farmers or fly fishermen might wear. And that's what I carry. And the other guides, we carry our own muck boots. And anybody on any trip, you're welcome to bring your own boots down. It's nice for the ocean tramp trips to take advantage of the ones that we have arranged for you there in Punta Arenas, because then you don't have to travel with them. And then Hanse Explorer, you will need to bring your own waterproof boots. And so the high top rubber muck boots are the one of choice. There are some extra pairs aboard, but it's more for, it's a bit of a mishmash. It's more for people who maybe their luggage was delayed or something like this, or somebody's, boot springs a leak or whatever it is. There's some extra ones on board, but we don't have any to issue to every passenger on board. So Hanse Explorer, bring your boots. And then, yeah, on down the line. Waterproofs are really, really important. I'm not talking about these light little, I'm going to go out for the day and I want a rain jacket I can, stick in my bag just in case it's wet out. It can be very, very wet, and it's definitely going to be windy up there. You need a proper rain jacket that would be more for like long-term backpacking or mountaineering or sailing, something like this, like something that comes down below your waist level, something where you can adjust the cuffs over your gloves and things like this, something that has a really nice hood that comes up and gives some protection to the side of your face, so you can really be watertight, snow tight, windproof with that. Waterproof pants as well. Waterproof pants, I think you can get away with something that's a little lighter if you wanted to. Some of us have more of like a mountaineering bib style waterproof pant. If you have those, then I recommend bringing them. I don't recommend going out and buying a $500 pair of waterproof bibs if you already have, the $150 version that you can get from, the gear store downtown, that, it's just kind of a fold up little, just something waterproof without being fancy. But you need something that's waterproof that you can wear when you're walking around for sure. I'll mention that on Australis, they actually have Mustang float suits, and we use those all the time. They're actually mandatory for the Zodiac excursions. You'll wear those all the time. They're waterproof, they're insulated, and they float. Most people, I think, really use those when we're on shore as well. And so that can act as your waterproof whenever you're out doing excursions, and it's really nice. But even still, when you're aboard the boat, you want to just sit up on deck, or when we're in Punta Arenas and it's pouring rain out, you'll want to have the nice waterproof jacket like I talked about. So everyone should bring that nice heavy waterproof jacket. If you're on Australis, you also get the choice of wearing the Mustang suit sometimes. And then lastly, I'll talk about gloves. So I bring a whole selection of gloves. It can be pretty wet out there sometimes. You just never know what you're going to get in Antarctica. If you know a weather or wind system comes from particular directions, it can be pretty wet. We're going to go out and do stuff no matter what the conditions are like. So I have 2 pairs of like a medium weight glove, and then I have a thin leather pair of gloves. And then I have a heavy pair of gloves if it gets really cold. And I think most of the time down there, I'm in one of my medium pairs of gloves. And so if we go out in the morning and it's really wet, I'll stick the gloves up on the dryers that we have in any one of the boats. And then in the afternoon, I'll grab my warm ones. And that way I can rotate through and always have a nice warm pair of gloves to wear. So if there was something, you know, that you're going to double down on, I think it would be gloves. And maybe even a hat, actually, for that matter. I carry 2 wool hats for that exact same reason. I always have something that's warm and dry that I can put on. Okay, and then other gear. Please pay particular attention to the type of luggage that you're bringing down. And this is for your own benefit as well as restrictions on some of the charters. So soft duffel bags are preferred. I can talk a little bit about the differences between each boat here. So I can tell you that if you're on Hanse Explorer, then you have to have a completely soft duffel. Yeah, none of the rolling duffels or with a backboard or anything like that. It needs to be completely soft. This is a requirement of the charter that you have between Punta Arenas and Puerto Williams, actually the opposite direction. It's Puerto Williams to Punta Arenas. You have to have that because of that really small plane. It's the only way to be able to fit the gear into the cargo compartments. If you're on Ocean Tramp, you also need to have a completely soft duffel. And this is because storage space is at a minimum in your rooms and on the Ocean Tramp. And if you have a completely soft duffel bag, you'll be able to roll it up and store it underneath the bed. If you have anything that has a hard side on it, it won't be able to be rolled up and it'll just be in the middle of your floor for the whole trip. And that's no good. You don't want that. There's not enough room. Don't give yourself that choice. Just show up with a soft-sided duffel. And then for Australis, soft-sided completely is preferable. But for those people, if you have the one, you know, kind of the back that's firm, hard-sided with the roller on it, that would be okay on Australis. And that's because Australis has a big cargo hold and we could potentially stack a couple of these on top of each other and it still doesn't take up much room. And that is okay on Australis. But on none of the boats is hard-sided, completely hard-sided luggage allowable. If you were to show up with this, then we'd have to ask you in Punta Arenas or Ushuaia to purchase the appropriate bag. So it's really not a choice. Please bring the soft-sided duffels and then you'll be in good shape. Then day packs, something waterproof or water resistant is preferable down there for all the reasons we've said, right? It can be wet and manky. You know, you'll be in the snow or you'll be out up on deck. And so it's something like that. It doesn't have to be super fancy. It just has to be something where the water can't soak through it very quickly. So like, for instance, my camera bag for a long time, it would, you know, had a kind of a canvas back to it and then this kind of plasticky sort of thing on the outside. That's perfect. Or if you have some of like the more river rafting kayak style, like, you know, the big bags where you shove everything in the big rubber bag and then you roll in the top and then it has a little backpacking strap, that's super appropriate. And then if you have, you know, the other way that you could do it is with a backpack cover to make it waterproof, and that's fine too. I would just say that make sure that it fits pretty tight, because if there's a lot of extra material on the backpack cover when it's cinched down over there, the wind catches it and it's really windy down there oftentimes, and it'll just rip those things right off and you might lose it and your stuff gets wet. It's just a lot more to have to deal with. So just make sure that if you're bringing, if your way to waterproof your bag is a pack cover, just make sure it fits nice and tightly and that it's properly sized for that bag. And then also trekking poles. So Hansei Explorer and Ocean Tramp don't have trekking poles aboard to issue. If you need trekking poles or want them, you should definitely bring them. And I would say if you're not sure if you would want a trekking pole or not, if you're on the fence, I'd say bring it. It's better to have it and not use it. And it can be tricky in, kind of the soft summer snow or on some of the rockier beach landings. Some of the, maneuverability out there can be a little tricky. So just bring it. You'll have it if you need it. If you don't, no big deal. It's easy for us to stash that in the Zodiac, and you can have your choice. If you're on Australis, we have those aboard actually, so you don't have to travel with your own trekking pole unless you thought maybe you'd want it for the hike around either Punta Arenas or Ushuaia, where you're starting from. So if you thought you wanted, to hike when you're around Tierra del Fuego, bring it. Otherwise, we'll have them available on Australis aboard. Couple extra little things then. We probably have some photographers here, I'm sure. So think about camera equipment. Same as the gear, I really try to minimize things. There's not a lot of room, and I also don't want to have to carry a lot of weight. There are some luggage restrictions. I'll speak to some of this detail stuff in a minute, but there are some restrictions about weights on some of the planes. And so I'm always looking to shed weight and just reduce space. I bring one body. I have a 100 to 400 telephoto lens, and then I bring one wide angle lens with me. I would definitely recommend the telephoto lens comes with you. You could choose between a wide angle or maybe a mid-range zoom. So maybe you bring a 20 millimeter or something, or maybe you bring a 24 to 70 in addition to your zoom lens. And that's all I bring in addition to a power charger. It's all I bring for camera equipment down there. I don't bring a tripod, because we're always on moving boats and moving animals and all these things. Like, I don't bother with the tripods down there, just extra weight and extra things to carry. And I don't bother with a lot of accessories. There's just not a lot of space. You're gonna have gloves on, things are kind of wet and damp, it's windy, you might be on deck of the boat. It's just hard to manage all of that stuff. And I would say just bring a really simple kit with a couple nice lenses and you'll be really good to go. Gratuities and cash. So gratuities are included for most things that are on the trip. Again, each one of your departures is going to be slightly different. So I'm going to point you in the direction of your pre-departure briefing and your materials to tell you exactly what you might need. But I can tell you that once you leave Ushuaia and Punta Arenas, of course, there's no ATMs or anything like this aboard the boat. So if you think you might need cash for anything or to pass on gratuities, you'd want to think about that before you get down there. More and more, I think everybody, if people don't want to have to travel with cash, then it's super appropriate to, pay gratuities. For instance, like, if you're, well, I guess we're covering, sorry, let me back up. So we cover gratuities for all of the crew aboard for you now, so you don't have to carry cash. And the expedition leaders would accept cash or PayPal or something like that if you didn't want to carry cash. That's completely fine. Yeah, that would be the way to go. There is one place that you might have heard about that's a bit special called Port Lockroy, and it's run by the UK Antarctic Heritage Trust. The Penguin Post Office is down there, and they have a little gift shop. We're not always able to make it there. Sometimes because it just doesn't work out in our itinerary. We're doing other incredible things. Sometimes just because it's a port of call for the cruise ships. And so there just might not be scheduling availability. So there's no guarantees, but there's a chance that we could go there. And if that was the case, they would accept a credit card. So it's useful to have a credit card when you're down there as well. And then just a reminder, don't forget power adapters. We do have a variety of adapters, charging stations, different places and ways to charge aboard those boats. But when you're in Punta Arenas, Ushuaia, you just want to make sure that you have the correct chargers with you when you're down there, and the adapters for those charges. All right, moving along here, we're doing all right, 45 minutes. Just a couple quick things about accommodations. There are different hotels that we use in the different cities and for the different trips, and there's a variety of reasons for that. They're all really wonderful. You're going to find these hotels to be very well appointed. They're going to, some of them might have like USB chargers and that sort of stuff, but you will need your power adapters when you're in these hotels, right? They're not set up with typical US base chart plug sockets like that. So just know that you'll need that down there. Other than that, yeah, they have restaurants. They're all located within walking distance of everything there is to do downtown, and the whole group is staying at each one of these hotels. They're all really nice. They're they're all a little bit quirky, a little bit funky. They all have their own different thing. Like for those that are at the Dreams, it can be a little. So the first time I walked in there, there's actually like a casino that's attached to the lobby, like this really small kind of, what are they? The slot machine casinos. It's like, what's going on? But you'll see once you get in there, you have these bay or city plaza facing windows, and they have this beautiful restaurant. Liegua Loca is another one. It's more of a B&B in the other town, and it has a little garden restaurant to sit at, and they all have just this wonderful character. Anyway, I won't go through all the hotels, but they're all wonderful. You can expect all the usual services at these hotels. That's the main point. So they're going to have Wi-Fi, they'll have phone service, they're all located downtown, they're near banks, they're near restaurants, other activities. The concierge in these hotels, if you're arriving early or if you're staying late, in addition to just asking us, the expedition leaders, the concierges at these hotels can help you figure out what activities you might want to do if you're spending extra time in those areas, depending on how you feel and how the weather's doing there at the time. Yeah, life aboard. Once we're aboard the ship, it's really nice. Our typical schedule is that, we're up in the morning, we're having breakfast somewhere around 7:30, 8 o'clock. Then we pack up and we go out on a morning excursion, whatever it might be. There's no eating or drinking allowed on Antarctica, and that's for protection of the wildlife. And so we'll always come back and we'll have lunch aboard the boat, and then we'll go out in the afternoon and we'll have another exploratory mission in the afternoon. We come back. There's time to hang out on deck, hang out in the saloon. We'll sling some drinks for happy hour, have some appetizers, go into dinner, and then you can return to your quarters, of course, anytime during the day. You could opt in and out of activities. Sometimes people are like, hey, that was great. I loved kayaking. I don't need to do it anymore. I'm going to hang out, read a book, talk to the captain, check out the engine room, whatever it is, hang out aboard the boat. While other people do stuff. That's always an option, right? Every activity is always optional when we're down there. My job is to create opportunities for you to do all these interesting things. So you can always enjoy the hospitality aboard these boats. And then, we try to do, the expedition leaders, we try to do some presentations and stuff for you. There's citizen science projects aboard each boat. So we could talk about cataloging whales. Maybe we do a plankton tow. If you're on the ocean tramp, we have the ability to do plankton tows for a science project. Things like this. And then, maybe we'll do a presentation about whales and conservation. Maybe we'll talk about some of where Wildlife Fund's work in the Arctic, in the Antarctic while we're down there. So we'll have the opportunity to do some presentations and a more or less formal capacity in some of the evenings when we're there on board. And then also dietary. So just like the medical, it helps to have your dietary well in advance. So please don't wait until the last minute for that, because we're going to do all the shopping and food orders pretty far ahead of your trip. Yeah, we can handle anything and are happy to handle anything that you have. We just need to know what you have going on, right? So if there are particular foods that you need to avoid, or typical kinds of food that, you need to eat or prefer to eat all the time, let us know. It can be really tricky. It is really tricky to buy specialty ingredients in the very small towns of Ushuaia and Punta Arenas. And so, we usually order through a distributor in advance. So let us know if there are specialty things that you need or want aboard, and then we can handle any of that kind of stuff for you. And the chefs aboard each one of the 3 vessels can be prepared. And then when you do show up, it's always great to check in with the chef, and we can help introduce you to those people, and you can have another conversation if you have anything, sort of what I like to call advanced dietary. And I'm one of those people, so I know what that's like. And it's always nice to be able to talk to the chef directly and make some fine-tune adjustments. But what they won't be able to do is produce ingredients that don't exist once you're aboard the boat. So just think about that in advance. Okay, we're nearing the end here. Thanks for sticking with me. A couple other things just to run through. So what to expect when you arrive. So you're going to go through, of course, international arrivals, either to Punta Arenas, I guess it would be Santiago or Buenos Aires, right? And then you'll go down to the other towns from there. So you'll pass through immigration and all of that stuff at your first port of entry into either Argentina or Chile. I'll note that if you come through Chile, they're going to give you what's called a PDI slip. PDI slip, and they don't do a very good job of explaining to you what that is or what to do with it. I can tell you that you need to hang on to it because when you go out again, they'll collect that and they'll use information from that slip to enter into the system what you're doing. It's probably more complex in Chile than it really needs to be, but that's the way that it is. Just make sure you hang on to that PDI slip when you go through immigration. You'll need it perhaps even a couple of times later. And I just keep mine right with my passport so it doesn't get lost. Other than that, everything's a regular airport experience. You know, you'll go through the international terminal, you'll move over to domestic, you'll fly down to either Ushuaia or Punta Arenas. When you arrive at those terminals, these are very, very small terminals, like the kind of thing where like you can't lose anybody because you can just see from one side of the room to the other, right? So really, really small, easily navigable. There aren't even any hallways or anything in these things. It's just one big room. So what'll happen for everybody is you're going to come out of the baggage claim, and as soon as you come out of baggage claim, you're going to be in the one room, and there's going to be a driver there, and that driver will have a NatHab sign, right? So you'll see someone wearing the NatHab clothing and the logos, big smile on their face. They're going to have a big sign that says NatHab. Usually the expedition leaders, we do our best to make sure that we meet everybody there. Sometimes there are some scheduling conflicts and you know, so it's not promised, but for 99, if not 100% of you, we will come and meet you at the airport as well to see you there and welcome you in. If for some reason we're not able to make it, because things do happen down there and we may need to help with some logistical issue or whatever it is to make sure that we're departing on time and we miss you at the airport, then we'll find you at the hotel when you get checked in. And we have your contact information, and you'll get a welcome letter with our phone numbers on it at the front desk when you check in. So if for some reason you don't see us at the hotel, at the airport, then we'll catch up with you at the hotel prior to the welcome dinner. Then we can check in, get to know each other a little bit before we meet the group. And then that evening, the evening of day one, I guess people can arrive on different days. Yeah, that's worth mentioning. We're going to meet you if you're there on the arrival days. If you're coming in early, you know, things like this, we won't be in town yet. I only get in town the day before the welcome dinner myself. So if it's on the welcome dinner day, we'll be there to meet you. Anyway, and then we'll meet you, everybody again at the welcome dinner. You'll get to meet the group, and then we'll do a sort of a small presentation for you just to get everybody on the same page with your very specific trip and your guest and your ship and your itinerary. So that's what you can expect when you arrive. Please remember to have the NatHab luggage tags on your bags. They look just like this right here. Those are super useful. Just because it helps us identify you. The luggage moves around. Once we get going on the ships, you know, and moving back and forth from Puerto Williams and King George Island, you know, where we're taking some of these charter flights, there'll be other groups that are around. And so having the NatHab luggage tag makes it really easy to sift and sort all the bags and make sure that your bag is going to the correct place. If you don't have a NatHab tag on it, that's asking a lot more of some of these baggage handlers to figure out where it's supposed to go. So let's just make it real obvious for everybody, have those tags on there. And if you don't have a tag, you can just request that through the folks at the concierge here at NatHab. Okay, and then a little bit about the flights there for King George Island. So this is a regular airport experience as well. When we're flying south, you're going to need your passport. You're going to need that little PDI slip, and they'll say, all right, you're not in continental Chile anymore. You're going south, and you might end up, you know, back in Argentina or whatever it might be. So you'll need that. The airplane going down south, it's 50 pounds of luggage, and that's the same with coming up north, right? So any of the flights that you're doing that are the charter, so 50 pounds. So that's it. That's your goal when you're coming down here. You want to make sure that you're hitting that 50-pound mark. If you're over that goal, then they have the right to tell you need to take something and leave it behind. And there's no good way to do that because we're going to fly one way and sail back to a different location or vice versa on a lot of these trips, right? So make sure that everything is tight that way. It's a reasonably short flight, hour and a half, 2.5 hours. It really depends a lot on the wind. So there's a big amount of variability in that. We land on a dirt runway in a very improbable place on a very improbable island. And so delays are really common. The Shetlands stick out far into the maritime environment of the Drake. It tends to be very foggy and very rainy on a typical day. And so they're always looking for a weather window to drop our flight in. So we'll have intended times to be at the airport and ready to go. And then that flight will go whenever the pilots deem that there's a appropriate hull for us to land or take off. So expect that, it's going to be a very fluid day anytime that we're flying. And then once we get there, yeah, you probably read, it's a 20-minute walk on on the gravel. We'll get down to the water. We'll get picked up by the boats and then by the little boats and then brought to our vessel. So you can expect it could be at least an hour, if not longer, from the time that we land, from the time that you get on your boat, and you're going to be outside in Antarctica at that time. So when we land, you're going to have all your clothing and everything for cold, fickle weather on King George Island. And on your welcome presentations with the expedition leaders on day one of the trip, we'll have a weather forecast for the next day, and we'll be able to fine tune a little bit of that packing for you for the next day. And then we'll have an embarkation time, right? So we'll take that Zodiac over to the boat, then we'll get you on, you'll get to meet everybody aboard. We'll introduce you to the captain and give you a nice welcome, show you to the cabin, all that kind of stuff. And then we'll do some safety briefings in those IATO site visitation briefings so that everybody knows how to behave once we're out there from a responsible tourism angle. So that's it. I would like to just reiterate, we have a lot of logistics to think about to make the trip happen, but then once we get there, everybody, that's just it. We have what we have, we settle in, and we're gonna go have some amazing wildlife experiences, some amazing times paddling and walking and hiking. We'll see the penguins. We're gonna try to find you leopard seals down there. There will be whales feeding, sometimes more whales than we can even handle, sometimes only a few. Icebergs everywhere. We're going to do a lot of scenic cruising. You'll see icebergs and wildlife and mountains and glaciers. We'll go kayaking. We'll see the same stuff. It is just incredible. And so these logistics we're talking about today, they're really a means to an end for what is just an incredible trip of a lifetime. So thanks for being with us. Thanks for coming down. And yeah, Rob, how about we entertain some questions for a little bit?
All right. Thank you, Colby. Now, before we start off with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. So let's get to some of these questions. So can you say what kind of outlets are on the boats? Do I need any sort of adapter to charge my electronics or camera equipment?
Yeah, so we have adapters on there. Each boat is different, and even in some of the different rooms is different. But what I can say is anything that you bring, each vessel has the capacity to charge, no problem. But the same adapters that you'll use in, Punta Arenas, for instance, like some of the plugs aboard Ocean Tramp will have those same, or Australia, they'll have the same plugs, right? And some of them will be the regular standard US plug. So as long as you're bringing that one adapter that's highlighted in the pre-departure briefing, I forget what it's the number of it or whatever the code, but it's in your pre-departure briefings. As long as you have that, you'll be fine. And then we'll point out the charging stations on each one of the boats.
Great, thank you. So are there any medical restrictions or vaccination requirements for going to Antarctica?
There are no vaccination requirements, but there are some medical restrictions. We do on this trip require a note from people's doctors saying that they're fit and able to go to, again, this very remote, very challenging environment, and that we don't expect any potential complications for them with travel down there. So that doctor sign off is the requirement.
So what kind of kayaking gear is aboard? Do I need to bring anything, or do you guys have everything I'll need?
Yep, great question. We have everything that you'll need. And I'll mention about kayaking too, there's a lot of different types of kayaking. We are kayaking just for fun, for people that have never kayaked before, that want to get in the water, paddle around. Being out there, having the motor turned off, being able to just sit a little bit, turn yourselves around in the direction you want to face and be out there. It's really nice. And sometimes we get penguins or seals that will even come along with us. So the idea is that we're not there for a rigorous kayak. We're there to get out and enjoy ourselves in a kayak. And so these kayaks are touring boats. There are 2 people per kayak. They're fairly wide and they're fairly flat bottomed, which means that they're really stable and really comfortable. So you can put your paddles up and pick up your camera whenever you want and take pictures. You know, it's really nice. It's really casual. We have all the equipment that you would need for a comfortable paddle. Yeah, and different boats again have different types of equipment available on there, like the kayaks aboard each one, and you know, all of these things. They're different depending on which vessel you're on, but the idea that it's for everybody and we can provide anything that you need, including some instruction and safety tips and just tips for, you know, general comfort. We'll do all that for you when you're there.
Is there a particular brand of rubber boot that you could suggest for us?
Yes. There are several different companies, Boggs, Muck, and Extra Tough with an X, T-U-F-F. Extra Tough are all really good choices for rubber boots. Yeah.
Is there
And
any need?
those are the high, you know, the high top rubber boots. So they come, you know, high on your calf. Those are the ones you want because we get in and out. We have a lot of wet landings in Antarctica, right? So you want to be able to stand in water that's fairly deep depending on the tides. And so that's this height boot that you want, the high calf boots.
Is there any need for a traction device such as yacht tracks?
No.
Good to know. Good to know. So is there any particular age group that you recommend go on these trips, or is it open for anybody?
Yeah, age for sure. You know, like older teenagers would probably do fine on this trip. But no young kids for sure. It's too small of a place. There's too much safety and risk involved. Yeah, particularly in a group setting, it's not super appropriate to have younger kids aboard. Yeah. Other than that, you know, I mean, age is nothing, isn't it? Really, I think it really comes down to just your own, you know, your own physical abilities and your own attitude. If you have you know, an adventurous spirit, and then you're mobile, right? Like I know, like on the you know, kind of the surveys and things that net have things that it's like, how many miles can you walk? And like that doesn't matter here. We're not walking very far. You're going to fall in a crevasse. There's too much ice and you can't go very far. But here we're getting in and out of rubber boats. There's waves. The boats are moving around. You might have to climb a ladder on the 2 sailboats to get in and out of, you know, the Zodiacs, and the Zodiacs are moving up and down, and you're coming onto that boat using a ladder. We're in the snow. The snow can be deep. It's kind of slushy and wet, summer snow, rocky, slippery kind of stuff. So those are the conditions that you want to think about physically. And if you have good balance, you're stable, you have good mobility, like to be able to lift your legs up and around the rubber boats, that's what's more important than something like age or how far you can walk.
So for the flights, how strict are they on the weight of the day pack?
They're very strict. However, the flights are usually, and this is the thing, they're usually not full. And so they usually won't bother weighing the day packs. But once they have a full flight or they're carrying a lot of cargo, which happens occasionally, they're going to weigh everything, and then they're very strict about what you can and cannot take. So it pays to be within those restrictions because you never know, you might show up on the day that they really care.
Great, thank you for addressing that. So do any independent type of visitors get onto the boat at any time, and would they be made to follow the avian flu protocols if they did come on?
I'm not sure I completely understand. Like anybody that's on any of the normal tourism ships down there or vessels like ours, they're all required to do it because we're all fall under IATO. There are private people private yachts that might come down to Antarctica, and they're not part of the tourism. They, as part of their permitting to get down to Antarctica, they're informed about these, but it's up to them if they actually practice those things or not. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
But they of course should be, right? It's a huge risk to wildlife if people aren't doing that.
Absolutely. So you mentioned no eating or drinking while on land. Would that include water?
Water's fine. Yeah, water's fine.
And is a camelback something I should consider bringing, or is that not practical?
I think camelbacks are another thing that it's like, when they work, and when they don't, and there's no coming back. Like there's no way to break a water bottle. You're not going to have a problem with a water bottle. A water bottle is not going to leak. So my choice is always going to be a water bottle. I also don't have to worry about the bladder hose or the tip of it freezing. If we get cold days out there, like, that might just freeze right up on you. So for all those reasons, I don't prefer a water bladder.
Well, thank you, Colby. Unfortunately, that's going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for being here. I'm really looking forward to having you down there with us. Like I said, these logistics, they're just a means to an end, but we'll dial it in. We'll make sure that you're comfortable, you're safe, you're well prepared, ready to go. Work with the concierge team on that. Post this. They have answers, of course, to a lot of questions. And then, yeah, it's going to be fantastic. Whichever ship you're on. I mean, these are just the most incredible trips in Antarctica. They really are. And it's so vastly superior to anything that the cruise ships are offering. You're going to be blown away. And I can't wait to be down there with you. It's going to be great.
Colby, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And
Yeah.
I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Now, if you are interested in information on how you can travel with us at NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including our registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We will see you next time.